Okay, hello. It's 8:30, and that means it's time for the 8:30 live. So let's see who checks in. Oh, right, I got to do the share thing. Let's see who checks in. We've had some really great conversations the past few days. So I am, optimistic that folks will stop in and say hello, share their thoughts, and listen to me talk for a little bit. Oh, that being said, a few days ago, somebody said on the live that I've got a good narration voice. And I said, if you have anything that you want me to narrate, just send it along. So somebody asked me to do The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Hello, Dorian. Welcome to the party. And Joanne. So I think that I will take him up on his request, and I will narrate The Raven live with my wonderful narration voice per his request. That being said, I'm not going to do it tonight, but it will happen in the next few days. I was thinking like it would be a nice Sunday night thing, but then I forgot about it until just now. So I guess I'll have to do it some other time. In any event, let's get on to some of the headlines because, that's what we do here. And I want to just sort of, let's see what we got. A comment. Just submitted my job app for Contact Tracer. Let me know if you could get in touch with your contact. Well, I'll be, okay, sure. I mean, the bottom line there is I don't know of anybody specific who's doing the contact tracing, but I'm sure I have connections to folks who are managing things there. So I'll just put that out there. But I do need when folks need a connection or want a connection, I do need a little bit of forewarning about when that's going to be needed, because usually I have to do a little bit of asking of others. But that being said, I will do it. And hello, Simon. Good to see you. Okay, so let's start with the new vaccine czar. And we'll start there just because it's sort of decently big news and a lot of people already know about it. So I just want to just cover it for folks because they may know about it, but they might not know the details. And I just want to make sure that folks are caught up on it. So Donald Trump appointed a vaccine czar, or really chief scientist, for his new Operation Warp Speed. Oh, you like that? Ha ha! Operation Warp Speed is, YouTube can't see it, but Facebook Live now has these cool masks where if you make gestures on the screen, cool things happen. Boom! Confetti. Okay, just by holding up my hand. In any event, Facebook Live aside, what is it? Yes, so Donald Trump appointed a chief vaccine scientist to run Operation Warp Speed, which is meant to be a super fast program to get a vaccine within a year's time. Now, of course, because Donald Trump is doing this, there is a problem. And that problem is that the vaccine czar that he appointed happens to be Moncef Slaoui. And this individual was a former big pharma executive. So why does that matter? Well, it turns out that he was on the board of a company called Moderna, which is actually in the running to produce a coronavirus vaccine. And it doesn't stop there. It would be one thing if he just happened to have a cozy relationship with a certain company that would be up for federal funding for vaccine research. It would be one thing and it would still be bad. But he happens to also be in possession of $10 million plus worth of stock options for Moderna. So essentially, if Moderna ends up with the first coronavirus vaccine approved by the FDA, you can bet that their stock is going to jump significantly, making Moncef Slaoui a potentially extremely rich man. Because again, he has 155,000 shares of stock options in that company. Now, just to give you a sense of what the relationship is between the federal government, corporations, and stocks, last month, before Slaoui was appointed to be vaccine czar, the federal government gave Moderna $483 million for vaccine development research. Moderna has a vaccine that's moving into phase 2 trials, and so they received $483 million to advance their research. As a result, their stock jumped 15%. So you can imagine that somebody who holds a sizable chunk, tens of millions of dollars worth of stock in that company, and is also in charge of who gets approval to move forward with vaccine development from the federal government, and potentially huge, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of federal grants, that's a real conflict of interest. Elizabeth Warren called for him to completely divest his interest in Moderna, and we'll see if that happens. But it doesn't seem very likely, given that the president himself continues to hold on to his business interests in the Trump organization, even though he is president. Which brings us to story number 2 today. Now, you might remember that some months ago, and by some months ago, I really mean a year ago, in July of 2019, there were several cases brought about the emoluments clause. Now, this is a little used clause because it doesn't really come up except when Donald Trump's president, but it's a little used clause in the Constitution that says that the president cannot receive any gifts or compensation or titles from foreign nations. This, of course, was brought up because Trump continues to operate personally his businesses and has not divested his stake in Trump hotels or any of these things. And as a result, it was argued in court that foreign nations are bribing effectively or giving emoluments to curry favor to the president through his hotels, basically by spending their money to purchase hotel rooms at Trump hotels when they're in DC and to run their conventions and gatherings at his properties. So one of the cases, which was brought by Maryland and Washington, D.C., made the case that they lost revenues for their convention centers, which were funded by taxpayer dollars. They lost revenue to unfair competition from Trump's properties. And this is important because in order to sue somebody in court, you have to have standing. And standing is really the idea that somebody's violation of the law actually caused you harm. There's a second case which was allowed to proceed in which Congress sued, saying that the president violated the emoluments clause by accepting money from foreign nations without the authorization of Congress. And there you can see that Congress is the aggrieved party because power was taken from them by the president in a sort of separation of powers argument. But in order for a state or an individual to sue, you have to demonstrate that harm was done to you. So the basis for that harm was that these states suffered unfair competition from Trump's hotels and by dint of him being president. Now, this was really about the Trump Hotel in Washington, which ironically is leased from the federal government, and in particular, the Postal Service. It's an old post office which Trump leases and converted into a hotel and convention center. In any event, this really centers on that convention center and the fact that it competes then unfairly, in theory, with Washington, D.C.'s convention center and Maryland's convention center. Now, that case was actually thrown out in July of 2019 by a 3-judge panel of the Fourth Circuit. However, in October of 2019, so that was done with big fanfare from Trump. Basically, a panel of 3 Republican judges completely threw out this argument, saying that the states could not prove any harm, and that in fact some patrons might be put off from using the Trump Hotel because of its association with the president. However, we now know that Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and several other countries have spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars at Trump's hotel in Washington, D.C. So in October of 2019, this case was given new life when the full D.C. Circuit Court decided to take up the case. And it just came out that, the D.C. Circuit, the Fourth Circuit, has overturned the decision of the 3-judge panel in a 9-6 decision, allowing this to move forward and for the case on emoluments to be heard. So this isn't a decision on the emoluments case itself, but it allows the emoluments case to be heard. Obviously, the Trump administration being very, very secretive about the president's financial records, which is one of the things being sought in having this case proceed. Obviously, to have the case, you need to get records about how much money passed through the hotel and the Trump organization. The president and his lawyers being very, very secretive about that, has vowed to appeal. So it is likely, or at least potentially possible, that this case will show up in front of the Supreme Court. And if it does, it will likely appear on the fall docket, which will be just about the time of the election. So, really big news, because this allows an emoluments case from really one state and one federal territory, I guess, to move forward. So this is pretty big, especially considering that this was initially turned down by a panel of judges. But again, the entire circuit court overturned that 3-judge panel in a 9-6 decision. So this is a pretty strong rebuke of that. Now there are some comments, so let's get to them, and then we'll just cover a few more points, and then we'll see. Julian Ballantyne says, "Do more things." I don't really know what that means, but more of these. Boom. I'm assuming that's what you meant. Stephanie Hunt, cronyism and insider trading, a typical day during the Trump era. Don't we all know it? My God. Mary Williams. Hello, Mary. Trump only thinks of himself. So true. It's so incredibly true. Which brings us to our next point, which is... Nope, it doesn't. There's no more Trump stuff. I'm sorry. But we did cover 2 really big issues, 2 really big important points on Trump, one of which I think was well known, but another one which seemed to have been slipping under the radar. So just keep it under your hat that this emoluments case is now moving forward, which is just fantastic. Because, of course, emoluments are basically presidential corruption, and ensuring that the president is not above the law is, I think, a very important part of everything we're trying to do here. Despite the other cases, which are also proceeding, being heard in the Supreme Court right now, in fact, to do with Trump's financial records, and the fact that his lawyers are literally making the argument that he is above the law as long as he's a sitting president and can't be investigated. But what are you going to do? Okay, so just 2 more things, and then, it's an easy Sunday, so then we'll call it a night and go have some dinner. Although I imagine most people eat before I do, but then I'll go have some dinner. So first and foremost, NYC beaches not opening for Memorial Day. I can't remember if I mentioned this yesterday, but the governor said that beaches will be opening for Memorial Day. And now, because this is how it works in New York, the mayor has contradicted the governor. The governor often contradicts the mayor and vice versa because they are in a pissing match. But what I will say is that whether or not New York City opens its beaches, New York State will be, and this is in coordination with Delaware and New Jersey, some of our nearby states. So these other states are beginning to phase out their lockdowns, and New York's northern regions and central New York are now also on the verge of moving into phase 1 of exiting lockdown. So New York City is really the last place which isn't even near ready to start phasing out lockdown. But of course, we have a much, much denser population, and we're hit much harder when this whole thing began. But that being said, beaches here, according to the mayor, will not be opening for Memorial Day. However, they have been open this whole time for walking as long as you maintain social distancing. What this really means is that nobody's going to be allowed into the water, sort of taking a lot of the fun out of the beach. But you can still go and walk in the sand so long as you maintain your 6-foot distance. Although I will say that I was in both Tompkins Square Park and Prospect Park today, and people are not wearing masks and they're not social distancing. They reopened the lawn in Tompkins Square Park, and people were just crowded on that thing. It was pretty. I just looked around, and there were people just sitting so close. I literally saw 2 people in a mask approach a woman without a mask, and then one of the guys in a mask leaned in and gave her a kiss. And he was wearing his mask, but she wasn't wearing a mask. And what the hell, people? Do you not know how masks work and how this whole thing happens? Anyway, whatever. Here's to all those brave souls in Prospect Park and on the lawns in Tompkins Square Park. Okay, now, finally, last thing, speaking of, actually perfect segue. Segues are really getting set up today. The NIH just released a pretty sweet report about how talking spreads coronavirus. So they went through the trouble of doing this really, really cool experiment with some high-powered lasers, which created a sheet of light. And that sheet of light allowed them to look at the particulate matter that comes out of a person's mouth when they speak. As it turns out, breathing doesn't actually really spread I don't want to say viral particles, but breathing doesn't really spread large droplets or droplets. There's both droplets and aerosols, and so this was really about droplets, but the droplets got pretty small, but they weren't aerosols. So in any event, breathing doesn't really spread droplets, but talking spreads droplets like crazy. So if you're within 6 feet of somebody, and you're talking to them, there is actually a real concern that there's an awful lot of saliva coming off of their mouth. The worst offenders were aspirating sounds like the H in healthy or ah. So any aspirational sound basically puts a ridiculous amount of stuff out there, and you can watch the video. You can see it for yourself, the amount of particulate that comes out of a person's mouth when they speak. Obviously, covering that mouth is just ridiculously important when you're going to be within 6 feet of people. And of course, the ideal here is not to get into close contact, not to be in close quarters, not to be within 6 feet, but because this is going to drag on for a while and that basically becomes an impossibility, you can't really keep people from being close to each other, human nature being what it is, the masks become so much more important. There was also a statement made that if 80% of Americans wore masks, we would stop the virus in its tracks. I didn't look into the actual math or science behind that, but because of the fact that this spreads through droplet transmission, and yeah, regular breathing isn't that bad. You can be on the street and it's okay. But it's that conversation that you're having with somebody. If you're not wearing a mask, you're really putting yourself and others at risk. So there you go. Let's just see what else we got here. Julianne Ballington. Shit, it's long. The way our politicians partner with companies is anti-democratic by its very nature. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, public-private partnerships are, I think, in a bid contract, it can work out pretty well where private entities provide, valuable expertise to the government. As long as you bid for it and it's not a closed bid system, it's difficult to rig. And that means that you don't really have nepotism, or you can prevent nepotism. But it's very difficult for the government to do everything. For example, like run its own paper mills for its own paper. That's not an efficient use of government resources. And they have no expertise in that per se. But certainly the way that it's done in practice, especially for large contracts, is quite corrupt. The way our politicians partner with companies is anti-democratic by its very nature. Cronyism and nepotism is hurting the country and our state. Cuomo has now announced that a fashion designer who happens to be his brother-in-law will now be leading the website on mental health. Cuomo's kids are already working on COVID projects for the state. Now his brother-in-law. Both Cuomo's and Trump's practices reek of dynasty creation. It seems like they would like to destroy our democracy the way Caesar destroyed the Roman Republic. Well, I already said my shtick on public-private partnerships. Nepotism, I think, is a lot easier to call out when you have your children and your relatives operating large government projects. And this, of course, is a hallmark of the Trump administration with Ivanka and Jared, leading large efforts. That being said, dynastic tradition is really one of passing power from generation to generation. And while I do see Trump potentially trying that out, having one of his children run or for president or even for a high political office, which then creates a political dynasty, Andrew Cuomo is not starting a dynasty. And we know that because the dynasty was already started by his father. Andrew Cuomo is the second Cuomo to serve as governor of New York. His father was governor for a long, long time, a very different sort of governor, but a governor for a long, long time. Andrew Cuomo is the product of dynastic tradition, and I don't see why he would change his tune now. It's benefited his family ever so much. Is it just confetti? There are other things, there are other effects, and I will introduce them in other lives. Something to look forward to. Deirdre Levy. He also married and had children with a Kennedy. Who are we talking about? Arnold Schwarzenegger? Because Schwarzenegger did that. In any event, that's basically the show for tonight. Just remember, wear your masks out there. It's very important, not just for you, but really for others. Honestly, I saw a meme the other day that was like, the federal government shouldn't worry about my health. You know, the government shouldn't make me wear a mask because they shouldn't be worried about my health. It's my job to worry about my health. It's the federal government's job to worry about, like, the federal government, it's my job to protect my health. It's the government's job to protect my rights. And really, even if you made that argument, wearing a mask isn't for your health. It's for everybody else's health. So all you're saying is it might be the job of the federal government to protect your rights. It might not even be their job to protect your health, but you're just insisting on being an asshole because you don't care about anybody else's health. All right. Oh, now more comments have come in. What I have seen Cuomo doing during his, quote, reimagining of New York is not beneficial for the state. Well, I would agree with you, but I'm sure there are plenty of others who would disagree. Andrew Cuomo's children are Kennedys. Are they? I don't know. No. I don't pay that much attention to Andrew Cuomo's family life. All I know is that I think he's a bad governor. Or even if he weren't a terrible governor, he's been governor for way too long. Well, I guess because I think he's a bad governor. All right, Andrew Cuomo's a bad governor. Yay. Hey. All right, and that's it. I'll see everybody tomorrow at 8:30, and I'll let everybody know when we do the rendition of The Raven. It'll probably be its own thing. Maybe next Sunday, if folks have things they want me to read because they think it would be nice to have me read them, send them over. And I won't read anything that's like trash, though. So, keep it classy, folks. Wearing a mask is like wearing a condom. You may or may not be infected, but it's a good practice. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I believe that. I'm trying to think because, like, a mask really isn't for you, but a condom, I am as concerned for myself when I wear one as I am for the other person. With a mask, I really am more concerned for other people than for myself because I don't believe the mask really prevents air from getting to my mouth because I'm still breathing. And unless you have an N95 or a surgical mask, which has a very, very high filtration rate, the odds are you're really preventing larger droplets from escaping your mouth because of proximity to the orifice than you are preventing aerosols in the air from being sucked in. And so that I think is the difference. But yeah, I'll buy that. Deirdre says, oh, thank you for sharing a link about Cuomo's marriage. I'm probably not going to read it because I don't care about Andrew Cuomo's family life. I only care about the policies. But for anybody interested, there you go. Dorian Key, so short. You want me to talk longer? I did all the news and answered all the comments. And should I read a thing? I need another minutes. Come on. Dorian, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the program. But that being said, while I do love the long conversations we have on the nice long episodes, there is benefits, certainly for me, to the days when we have shorter ones. You know what? I'll just read part of The Raven. You guys can give me some feedback, everybody who's stuck around. But, it's Sunday. There are, a lot of people that are sort of doing their Sunday evening routines. And so it's not the biggest audience. Like yesterday we had like a lot of people. Like 2 days ago, there were like a lot of people on the show. But here. Ooh, what if I just I'll read the preamble to the Constitution. How about that? We can have a little Sunday Church of the United States. Okay, I just Googled Constitution of the United States, and I'm going to read the first thing that Google gives me. How about that? Okay. Constitution of the United States of America, 1789, revised, 1992. Preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Tune in tomorrow if you want to know what happens next in the Constitution. All right. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with me. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I sure had a blast, despite the fact that I was pretty tired and was recovering from, I don't know what, some sort of fatigue thing. But I did volunteer. So if folks want to volunteer and help get groceries to seniors or help get some great folks elected, do let me know. I'm supporting a number of, now people are tuning in. What the deuce? What the hell, people? Can you read from the Magna Carta more interesting? Okay, I will read the first thing from the Magna Carta that comes up when I Google it. But if folks want to volunteer and help get seniors groceries, or they want to help some great candidates, let me know because I'm supporting some. All right, let's do the Magna Carta for Dorian because he has a request. And you guys can let me know. You can give me some, give me speaking notes. The Magna Carta. Okay. You know what? The Magna Carta doesn't have a really good, Google just doesn't bring it up. Clearly the Magna Carta is not as cool as the Constitution of the United States. English translation of Magna Carta. Was the Magna Carta not written in English? Wouldn't it be though, because it's a British document? All right. Well, here's from the British Library. English translation of Magna Carta. Translation of the full text of the original 1215 edition of Magna Carta from Latin into modern-day English, which clauses were later omitted and which are still valid today. Full text translation. John, by the grace of God, King of England, Lord of Ireland, Duke of Normandy and Aquitaine, and Count of Anjou, to his archbishops, bishops, abbots, earls, barons, justices, foresters, sheriffs, stewards, servants, and to all of his officials and loyal subjects. Greeting. Maybe that's how I should start the lives from now on. I quite like that. Shall I read one more? It's in ancient Anglo-Saxon. No, Dorian, apparently it's from Latin. It's in Old English. No, it definitely says from Latin. Original Latin. All right, read one more paragraph because it looks like it's got a lot of funny names in it. And then we'll call it. We hung out already. It's been almost half an hour now. Okay, here we go. Know that before God, for the health of our soul and those of our ancestors and heirs, to the honor of God, the exaltation of the Holy Church, and the better ordering of our kingdom, at the advice of our Reverend Father Stephen, Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England, and Cardinal of the Holy Roman Church, Henry, Archbishop of Dublin, William, Bishop of London, Peter, Bishop of Winchester, Jocelyn, Bishop of Bath and Glastonbury, Hugh, Bishop of Lincoln, Walter, Bishop of Worcester, William, Bishop of Coventry, Benedict, Bishop of Rochester. What the Master Pandulf, subdeacon and member of the papal household, Brother Aymeric, Master of the Knighthood of the Temple in England, William Marshall, Earl of Pembroke, William, Earl of Salisbury, William, Earl of Warren, William, Earl of... You think they did this in alphabetical order? William, Earl of Arundel, Alan of Galloway, Constable of Scotland, Warren Fitzgerald, Peter Fitzherbert, Hubert de Burgh, Seneschal of Poitou, Hugh de Neville. Remember, England did own France for, like, a part of France for a while. That's the War of the Roses. No, that's the 100 Years' War. Oh, are they the same war? I can't remember. Hugh de Neville, Matthew Fitzherbert, Thomas Bassett, Alan Bassett, Philip Daubney, Robert de Ropley, John Marshall, John Fitzhugh, and other loyal subjects. Man, we haven't even gotten to the part about what this thing does. Literally, it's just a bunch of names. It is like reading the Bible, except actually the next sentence is about God. So, high five. Come on. Facebook. It's not working. Rochester is in upstate, right? Yes, that's exactly what they were talking about. That's exactly the Rochester that the Magna Carta is referring to. Rochester in New York. But yeah, there's a Rochester in upstate. I imagine that they're exiting lockdown soon. Julianne, I can recite the prologue to the Tales of Canterbury in Middle English. I will also tell you what my acting teacher always told me. Go further with it. I don't even know what that means. Does that mean affect an English accent? I don't think so. I also have never... the Magna Carta. Should I read it as if I believe in the Magna Carta? I don't really. I mean, people talk about constitutional monarchy and how the Magna Carta established a constitutional monarchy, but it didn't. The Magna Carta is not a constitution. This thing could just be ignored and thrown out willy-nilly by Parliament. The United States, now there's a constitution. Neither did we, haha. So go further with it. Wonderful acting advice. I kind of want to read the first thing here. Okay, great. I will read the first thing here that's actually about the rights secured by the Magna Carta, because that is actually important and a foundational idea in the United States Constitution. And I've never actually read this document before. So today Jesus, it's quite long actually. All right, we'll read the first thing that's not a bunch of names. Per Dorian's request. Well, actually, that wasn't his request, but I'm going to do it because I'm interested. Woo! First, that we have granted to God, and by his present charter, First, that we have granted to God, and by this present charter, have confirmed for us and our heirs in perpetuity, that the English Church shall be free, and shall have its rights undiminished, and its liberties unimpaired. That we wish this so to be observed appears from the fact that we of our own free will, before the outbreak of the present dispute between us and our barons, we granted and confirmed by charter the freedom of the church's elections, a right reckoned to be of the greatest necessity and importance to it, and caused this to be confirmed by Pope Innocent III. This freedom we shall observe ourselves, and desire to be observed in good faith by our heirs in perpetuity. So the very first thing that the Magna Carta does is violate the First Amendment. Typical British crap. That's why we have our own country. Come on, Facebook. There we go. Julian Valentin, who are you talking to? I don't know to which thing you're referring, but I'll tell you who I'm talking to now. Nobody. End of the show, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Dorian, I really hope you're happy. And yeah, eventually we'll do the Raven per Cam Williams' request. And I will, was it Cam Williams? A Cam made that request. And I will let Cam know when that's happening so he can invite his friends. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.